June 19th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Barney?
Mr. Bova?
Here.
Mrs. Cerrucci?
Here.
Dr. Kalkstein?
Here.
Mr. Lapsevich?
Here.
Mr. McIntyre?
Here.
Mrs. Warning? Here. Mr. Williams?
Here.
And Mr. Gottman?
Mr. Gottman. On cue.
Somebody coming in high school.
Do we have anybody in the audience that wishes to address the board this time on agenda items? Richard?
Richard?
No. Section B, bills and financial reports. Mr. Schott?
Mr. Williams. This evening, we'd like to present Section B1 list of bills for the month of June 2018. I'd also like to mention that, as we typically do for the month of June, we will be adding an additional Section B1 list of bills for the June regular board meeting. That enables us to process additional bills, help us reconcile some of our accounts payable, some of that process. That'll be separately marked, asterisked, so there'll be no confusion to the additional added item. We also have this evening to present Section B2 monthly financial statements for the month of May, and also the Section B3 budget transfers, the final budget transfers for the month of June 2018.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. Section C, items previously tabled, we have none. Section D, personnel matters. Ms. Crump?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Under resignations, we have 7 listed. We are announcing the resignation of Mr. Murphy. That is to be determined. He has submitted his resignation effective the 7th. Once we determine with the new school district when we will release him, we will finalize the date on that. We have 4 additional paraprofessionals who could not fulfill their commitment for ESY. Under leave of absence, we have 6 listed. Section 3, transfer per the collective bargaining agreement. Employment, we have a substitute custodian and a substitute food service worker who will be hired on an emergency need basis as she is one of our current retirees, or will be soon one of our current retirees.
When you say could not fulfill their commitment to the ESY program, can you maybe just elaborate a little bit?
When we advertise for the positions, we anticipate that they will be there for the whole 4 weeks. So that way it gives us some consistency with the students. As the summer progresses, some have different things that come up, better opportunities, or things in their personal life that they cannot fulfill. So they've notified us that they cannot work, which is why you will notice under employment, we have some names listed as replacements. So we do have 6 listed for extended school year. Early literacy, we have 3 names listed for that. Supplemental contracts, we have 3 is listed. Excuse me. Volunteers, 1. And then we also have the motions for the elimination of professional positions. At this time, we are recommending that we eliminate the following positions: 1 high school PE position, 1 high school English, 1 math, 1 chemistry, a .5 elementary, a .5 nurse, and 1 ESL teacher. We also have a motion on there for the elimination of support staff positions. We are currently eliminating 5 teacher aide positions through attrition, and we are recommending 1 secretarial position.
Questions or comments?
Question, when are these people going to be notified that their positions are going to be taken?
All people have been notified that we have the names of. The only people who have not been notified is the secretarial position, and that because as of this time, we have not determined. Once we finalize who the position is, I will contact that individual before it becomes public and talk to them and let them know of all of their options.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Trish. Section E, conferences and conventions.
Dr. Chakey? Thank you, Dr. Short. Up for review tonight, we have a total of 4 conferences and conventions, starting with Mary Jane Edwards and going on to Krista Seneca for the National Autism Conference, Dr. Philip Woods, Equity Coordinators Task Force, and Ms. Crump, the Steel Eagle Leadership Conference.
Questions or comments?
The conference for Mary Jane Edwards is an action item because as our
Okay. Question?
Question. Dr. Woods, that's already been done? We're just approving that now?
Yes.
Okay.
I need a motion, I guess.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McIntyre, second by Mr. Ritter. Questions or comments?
I got a question. Seeing as the one for the action item and then the Dr. Woods one, they already happened, so like, why are we voting on it now? It's already happened.
I guess to pay them.
Yes, the information was submitted, and Trish, do you have information on, I should say, Dr. Jake, Dr. Woods' conference with Equity? I know we had discussed that.
Yeah, I met with Dr. Woods, and he submitted paperwork to go to this conference. He didn't hear back from the conference. I also attended the conference down over in Mechanicsburg. When Dr. Woods was there, he shared information with me that it had been approved, but the paperwork hadn't gone through yet. So he's just seeking reimbursement for the conference that he attended.
All right.
You know, it'd be the same thing from Ms. Edwards as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or
Yeah, but this
comments?
is a vote on the action item, so we need to actually
The
conduct
action
this
item
vote
first,
right.
yes.
So are we
That's
putting
important.
Dr. Woods on the action
No.
item?
No.
No, that's different.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Bonnie, can we have a roll call?
Mrs. Cerucci?
Aye.
Mr. Gottman?
Aye.
Dr. Kalkstein?
Aye.
Mr. Lapsevich?
Aye.
Mr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Mr. Ritter?
Aye.
Mrs. Warning?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Bova?
Aye.
Motion carries. Section F, Administrative Resolutions. Dr. Short.
Refer to Mr. Shaw. At this time, we do have an action.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Short. Yeah, and actually, we have 4 items this evening for action due to their timeliness, and actually 3 of these are typical ones we typically do this time of year. First one being the approval of the payment to Forbes Road Career and Technology Center for the estimated operating and administrative expenses for a 17-18 fiscal year in the total amount of $649,371.21 as depicted in Exhibit A. Item number 2 is to approve the district's participation in the Forbes Road Career and Technology Center's 2018-2019 fiscal year revenue anticipation note in the amount of $5,400,000 with an interest rate of 3.09% as depicted in Exhibit B. Item number 3 is the approval of the renewals and the premium payments for the following applicable district insurance coverage policies for the 18-19 fiscal year and as depicted in Exhibit C. This is actually the second batch of insurance renewals for us to complete all the coverages necessary for the 18-19 fiscal year. Item number 4 is to approve the change order for the Gateway High School Stadium Wall Remediation Project to CPS Construction Group, Inc. in the amount of $12,100 for the demolition of the existing south bleacher wall, excavation, backfill of stone and underdrain, construction of new concrete wall, and removal and reinstallation of existing fence as depicted in Exhibit D. Please note, the district is anticipating a change order credit from CPS Construction Group in the approximate amount of $18,718 for a PVC pipe and Zern nozzles. Thus, it is anticipated net project credit will still be realized at this point in time by the district for the Gateway High School Stadium Wall Remediation Project.
Is there a motion?
I got a question.
So,
Is there a second?
motion,
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. McIntyre, second by Mr. Gottman. Question?
Yes, sir. Mr. Schott, on the workman's comp insurance, how much difference is it from this year to last year?
It's gone up probably about $40,000.
$47?
$40,000. $40,000. Yeah, a lot of that has to do with the district's experience mod, some of the specific injuries that occurred for that. But even with this particular quote, we had multiple quotes for the workers' comp, and this still came in the lowest of all the other quotes that we had. Matter of fact, tomorrow I'm actually participating in a webinar for ideas to help control workers' compensation costs. So again, we're trying to take a look at that, trying to be as proactive as possible. Also trying to work with Brick Street as well to come up with some different ways for us to work with our staff, to remind everyone to try to work smarter and try to utilize some of the techniques out there available for it. I know Mr. Brown had Brick Street in, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago now, to address his staff lifting, those types of things for that. So again, it's an area we try to take a look at and try to be as proactive as possible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one about, about the change order. I don't know if maybe Mr. Lapsovich or Mr. Brown can answer, but just an explanation of why this is now coming in, $12,000 above the bid.
The reason for that is when they tore down.
Bob, could you go to the mic so the folks at home could hear, please?
Sorry, Bob.
When the southern wall of the retaining wall was torn down, the CMU portion, then that was exposed to see that it was necessary that we can't.
So it was something that was buried behind the wall,
Buried
wasn't
behind the
anticipated.
Existing
Unforeseen
stairwell
condition.
and a block. So once it was exposed, we knew we couldn't just build on top of it.
Gotcha. I mean, it's just more for the public's benefit.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand once you start digging.
Yeah, you don't know
what you're
what you
gonna
see
find.
till you get into it.
Outside of that, what is a Zern nozzle? Because I'm intrigued. Sounds alien.
It's kind of, what it is for all the weed pulls, it was a bronze nozzle that was in there to bring the water out further, but since we elected not to put the surface on the face of the wall, the tile surface, there was no need for them. Plus, we were concerned about them being knee catchers and tripping hazards, so it was something we didn't see to be necessary, and quite a bit of savings for what it was.
Okay, thank you.
Upon initial inspection of the wall, Bob had contacted my office. I went up there with him, and he showed me the extent of what the change order would be. So we did take a look at that, and it's definitely needed in order to repair and replace that section.
Thank you, Bob.
Any other questions or comments? Bonnie, can we roll call, please?
Mr. Gottman. Dr. Kalkstein.
Aye.
Mr. Lapsovich.
Aye.
Mr. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Ritter.
Aye.
Mrs. Warning.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Boba.
Aye.
Mrs. Cerucci.
Motion carries. Section F, other administrative resolutions.
Dr. Rossi?
Thank you, Dr. Short. Number one is the final approval of new textbooks for a new AP English course as listed. We also have a 30-day public display for the grade 8 physical science. Now that's part of that flex book that we discussed at the education meeting. It'll be a PDF version of it on display. Number three, I have an affiliation agreement with Carlow University as depicted in Exhibit A. Number four is a participation in a math cohort series for multi-tiered system of support. The district will receive a $10,000 stipend for participation. Number five, we have 3 facility agreements as listed.
All right.
Mr. Shaw?
Number 6 on, I think, is mine,
Yes.
Dr. Short, so I'll pick up from there. Item number 6 is the approve the increase in the price of all elementary and secondary student school lunches by 10 cents and the increase in the price of all elementary and secondary student school breakfast by 5 cents for 18-19 fiscal year to ensure the district's compliance with Section 205 of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act of 2010 as follows below. Item number 7 is approve and adopt the final cafeteria fund budget for the 18-19 fiscal year in the amount of $1,958,000, reflecting an increase in expenditures of $16,000 or 0.82% more than the cafeteria fund budget for the 17-18 fiscal year. Item number 8 would be to approve and adopt the final general fund budget for the 18-19 fiscal year in the amount of $75,308,000, reflecting a decrease in expenditures of $441,000, or 0.58% less than the general fund budget for the 17-18 fiscal year. The final general fund budget does include an increase in the district's real estate tax millage rate. Thus, the real estate tax millage rate would increase from 19.3264 mils by 0.5411 mils, 2.8%, to 19.8675 mils for the 18-19 fiscal year. The 19.8675 mils would be the equivalent of $1.98675 on each $100 of assessed valuation of taxable real estate property in the district. Note, the district will also be required to utilize unassigned fund balance in the amount of $328,000 to balance the general fund budget for the 18-19 fiscal year. Would like to note that from our last Budget and Finance Committee meeting, the additional amount of the unassigned fund balance was listed at $621,000, so we have been able to reduce that by $293,000 from that last meeting. We're still adjusting. Matter of fact, before this meeting started this evening, I've made some additional adjustments, and I'm still looking at some other revenue numbers as well. So we're still trying to lower this number as much as possible before next Wednesday's final vote on that. And again, looking at some other items as well. So the process still continues on the budget. It's never over. Item number 9, and this coincides with the budget as well. This is the annual approval of homestead, farmstead exclusion, real estate tax assessment reduction for 2018. Essentially, the district will be receiving $1,459,246.03 to be distributed among the 8,101 homesteads that comprise are located in Monroeville and Pitcairn. So each of those homesteads would be receiving a reduction of $180.35 on their real estate tax bills that would be going out for the 18-19 fiscal year. Item number 10 is another item, an annual item which we typically do since we don't have a July board meeting, to approve the payment of the applicable district bills by the business manager for the month of July 2018 in accordance with board policy number 616, via the section B1 list of bills for the month of July 2018. As we typically do, the list of bills will be compiled and emailed to the board for review on July 24th. The board will have until the close of business on July 30th to review the list of bills and ask any questions regarding the payments. Then the vendor check payments will then be mailed to the vendors on July 31st. Item number 11 is to approve the extension of the current liquid propane gas, auto gas equipment and pricing agreement, and the national propane supply agreement with Feral Gas for the purchase of fuel for the district's contracted school buses with Student Transportation of America for an additional term length beginning on July 1st, 2019 through June 30, 2020, with a final fixed price rate to be determined based on the current market conditions. Just an item to note below, the district's upcoming fixed price for propane for the 18-19 fiscal year is $1.14 per gallon. And hopefully, if the alternate fuel credit continues on, that would net out to 64 cents a gallon. Item number 12 is the annual award of the milk bid for the milk services and related food items to Turner Dairy Farms, Inc. for the district's food service department during the 18-19 fiscal year. That's depicted in Exhibit B. Item number 13 is to approve the agreement for the district's continued participation in the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services administered school-based access program in accordance with the terms and conditions, terms and applicable fees for the 18-19 fiscal year, and that's depicted in Exhibit C. Item number 14 is the acceptance of district donations received for 17-18 fiscal year, specifically a donation from Let's Move Pittsburgh Champion Schools Grant Program by Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens for Dr. Emily Levine. The utilization called Pedal to the Metal for Championship Behavior, Health, and Grades Program at Dr. Cleveland Stewart Jr. Elementary School in the amount of $1,000. And the second donation is comprised of miscellaneous contributors organized by Tiffany Pitts for district students to cover negative student food service account balances for applicable district schools. That was in the amount of $200. Item number 15 is to approve the various federal title funds for the 18-19 fiscal year for the following programs, and the amounts as indicated for Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, Total title funds, $929,233. Please note that the note there would need to be deleted. We actually were able to acquire the Title III number, and so we were able to update that. So again, the note for item number 15 will be deleted. Item number 16 is to approve the district's receipt of federal IDEA Section 619 pass-through funds through the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Number 3 DART program in the amount of $3,211, and the use of funds agreement and the preliminary budget of expenditures for the 18-19 fiscal year as depicted in Exhibit D. Also, item number 17, approve the district's receipt of federal IDEA Part B pass-through funds, also through the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Number 3, in the amount of $732,854, and the preliminary budget of expenditures for the 18-19 fiscal year as depicted in Exhibit E. Item number 18 is the approval of the educational services with Holy Family Institute for the 18-19 fiscal year at the daily rate of $149 per scheduled school day. And finally, item number 19, approve the agreement and payment for professional development services performed at the St. Bernadette School with Step by Step Learning LLC in the amount of $8,590 for 17-18 fiscal year as depicted in Exhibit F. Please note the district is required to utilize and provide support to parochial schools through the utilization of a portion of the district's Title II Part A federal funds for the 17-18 fiscal year.
Questions, comments?
I have one on item 7, Mr. Schott. The district has budgeted utilization of $80,650 of what essentially is the cafeteria's version of a fund balance to balance their budget.
Yes, correct.
Where does that leave them with that fund balance, roughly?
They're still in the about $400,000. It's still very healthy retained earnings balance for that.
Okay, like in the past, number of years, is that something that commonly happens if they dip into that fund, or have they been kind of adding to it?
Well, last year they actually added to the fund, and just to give you an idea, for the 16-17 year, there was also an amount budgeted from the retained earnings, likewise for the current year, but they were actually able to add to that amount for it, so they never did dip into it. They actually added to the retained earnings. Once I go through the process of reconciling the fund for the current year, we'll see exactly how the dust settles, so to speak, on that as well.
For 17-18?
For 17-18,
Okay, that's why I'm curious to hear
But I want to say
how we ended up on the bottom line for the 17-18 year.
And I think off the top of my head, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, but I think 4 out of the last 5 years, they've actually added to their retained earnings balance for that.
All right.
But again, once we have the number, we'll report that back to the board.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, moving on. Section G, resolutions presented by board members. Val?
Yes, this is a resolution to approve to support the Gateway High School Robotics Club during the 2018-19 fiscal year. Approve the district's support of the High School Robotics Club for the upcoming year, transferring $5,000 to the High School Activity Fund from the general fund during the 17-18 fiscal year. The reason why I'm presenting this right now is we had the Robotics Club here at our last meeting last month, and Google had withdrew their amount that they were giving them. And the kids are going out doing an awful lot of fundraising and talking to the students themselves. They feel that if we could support them, this would take care of their entry fees to the different programs and contests and meetings that they go to. So that's what I'm asking for this resolution.
Questions or comments?
Is this an action item?
Who is someone talking?
Mary Beth?
Your conscience, Jeff.
Yeah, I said, is this an action item?
No.
No.
Okay.
It's being presented.
I know I've been in touch with, Mr. McMaster. We've reached out to some companies and we're still waiting to hear back from. Have any other board members reached out to any other companies in the area for financial assistance?
Did everybody hear that?
I think what she's asking is, has anybody on the board looked for an alternative means to provide this $5,000 rather than use the taxpayer funds?
I'm going to make a comment. We, it's called a district donation, I believe, Mr. Schott, that we give to the bowling club, we give 1,000 to them, and we give 5,000 to the hockey club. So I was asking in response to, I'm asking in support of the robotics club. And also, if possible, I'm just going to add this, Mr. Schott, that since it is a district contribution, if it's possible that we get receipts from what they're using these contributions for, since it is taxpayers' dollars.
Sure,
Is that possible?
we can always ask for a report from those entities.
So that's why I'm just asking, on their support. They do an awful lot of fundraising on their own.
But to answer Ms. Cerrucci's question, I would assume that would be a no.
Did anybody reach out to them?
I have not.
I have reached out to Compunetics for no good reason aside from they're close to us and they seem to be, computer-based, if not robotics. So, but it's just the beginning of that conversation. And it's not only a good idea, but it seems to be an idea we need to think about for just about everything we do. We're in the middle of an area with some wealthy entities surrounding us, many of whom are nonprofit and who should be contributing because they take advantage of services, and like every other nonprofit, I believe people like UPMC pay the city of Pittsburgh, some little fee to make up for the fact that they're nonprofit. So, but I think we need a more orchestrated approach to this. Ms. Cerrucci, I don't know who you've reached out to.
So I've reached out to WabTech, and they do not donate to the specific cause. I reached out to Westinghouse Bechtel. They are already donating, I believe, $500. I reached out to Rotary, and we are trying to coordinate to have the club present at Rotary. They did have an opening at their May meeting, but our students were still in school, so they couldn't attend. So I think it's wise for us to continue to pursue as many options as possible. I know all the other clubs do those things too. I'm not saying that we shouldn't contribute. I'm just saying that we should be exhausting as many sources as possible. And I know that I personally have reached out to some companies and organizations on behalf of Robotics Club, and I just hope my colleagues and everyone else would do the same. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we heard you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on.
I got a resolution I want to present. At least add to the next meeting's agenda.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Pull it up here. Okay. It's a resolution of the Gateway School District establishing a policy concerning expenditures of the Gateway School District. Whereas the Pennsylvania School Code requires board approval for any expenditure over $100.00. And whereas expenditures come up during the month oftentimes after the study session, but before the regular meeting. And whereas the Board of Directors of Gateway School District often see expenditures incurred after study session for the first time at the regular board meeting and have no time to consider the same in a deliberative fashion. And whereas it is recognized that the administration may well have expenditures that need to be approved following the study session, but before the regular meeting, and have them considered for adoption at the regular meeting. And I'm looking for section 1, any expenditures incurred by the administration after study session, but before the regular meeting, which expenditures are presented for payment at the regular meeting, shall require a supermajority, which is 6 votes, by the Gateway School Board to be passed at the regular meeting. Section 2, all resolutions or parts of resolutions which are inconsistent herewith are hereby repealed. And Section 3, if any section, clause, provision, or portion of this resolution shall be held invalid or unconstitutional by any court of competent jurisdiction, such decision shall not affect any other section, clause, provision, or portion of this resolution, so long as it remains legally enforceable minus the invalid portion. Mr. Dice?
Yeah, Brian came to me and asked, I think what the concern is that between the study session and the regular meeting, expenses come up and you don't have a chance to discuss them in detail. Rather, they're brought up at the night of the regular meeting, and that's when you learn of them for the first time. I think he indicated to me that he had a problem with that, and that he wanted to cure that by saying, look, I recognize there could be a need for such an expenditure to be approved, but we ought to make it a supermajority. Otherwise, let it go till the next month, so you could have the opportunity to discuss it. I think that's what his basic concern is, and he's shaking his head yes. So I think I stated it.
It reads to me like we're basically incorporating any expenditure into the existing transparency policy that we implemented, I believe, last year.
And you
Where
had the
that was limited to board resolutions that resulted in expenditures. And this would include basically any money that's going to be spent. It should be presented at the study session and then voted on at the board meeting. But obviously, when things come up, emergency status type things or things of a timely fashion, that it still leaves the door open to get those passed.
With the supermajority.
Correct.
If I could comment.
But understand, the next month, if need be, it'd just be a simple majority because it would be up.
Right.
Go ahead, Paul.
Just for clarification, I think maybe you're referring more towards the actual resolutions that include an expenditure. Currently, and as what's presented this evening, with the exception of what I noted this evening, that the list of bills doesn't change. But for moving, for instance, for next meeting on the 27th, we would be adding an additional list of bills, again, for the end of the fiscal year for that. So it would be separately identified, list of bills specifically related to that.
Okay, and I think that's exactly what he wants to catch.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that. And I know that that's just part of the business that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
What I think happens is it will require, rather than 5 votes, 6 votes to approve those separate bills. And it happens, and I recognize it happens every month, pretty much.
No, it actually doesn't. This is actually a rarity, but it doesn't. But I'll tell you what, this is good timing because what I wanted to do was bring this up anyways. I mentioned probably a couple months ago in my weekly report about being able to add list of bills every month because there truly is a need. Unfortunately, some of our vendors, depending on when the study session regular board meeting is, they may submit their invoices. And there's invoices that we do want to get processed. We don't want to have to wait to the next meeting because they're either doing a service for us or something in a very timely manner. And, we always like to pay them out for that. But, I mean, this is fine with that. I mean, I definitely
hear what you're saying.
Would like to be able to add that grouping every month because when we were doing that previously, it worked great. We kept the vendors happy, kept our services, what we were doing.
Are you able to identify that for the board?
Oh, most certainly. Yeah, it would be, for instance, what we'll be presenting, we're going to be doing a separate run. It'll be a brand new section B1. It'll be asterisk added after study session meeting. You'll be able to take a look at that. You'll know exactly what was added to that. We won't simply merely merge it with what's here this evening for that. We would keep it separate for everyone. There'd be no doubt in terms of what you'd be looking at.
How soon, I think what Brian was concerned about is he's hearing about it the night of the meeting. If you have
Can
this.
I comment? This question?
Go ahead, Mary Beth.
I'm guessing this is more of expenditures like the scoreboard that came up that wasn't a regular expenditure like Mr. Shaw's talking about. That would be what motivated this policy.
That's my understanding, and if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Schott, the majority of things under list of bills are things that are already approved.
A lot of them.
We approved
Yeah,
that we were going to spend that money, we're just finalizing
The
that
general
we're cutting
budget.
the check.
Sure.
So I think
More
for the
formality.
most part, I don't think that's going to be subject to this. I think, if I'm correct, I don't want to say incident, but the proposal or the request that I think spawned this was the $300-some thousand for the iPad expenditure, which wasn't on the study session, and it came up, basically the night of that board meeting.
So we got to find a way to say this, because right now it says everything. So there are no exceptions. Paul would be caught by this. Somehow, while he's presented the resolution, and now it can be voted on next week, we can maybe add some language, Paul, you and I talk about it, so that your situation is somehow exempted from this.
Not compromised.
Not compromised, yeah.
I was gonna say, maybe to add to that, in terms of those expenditures that are presented in section F, the administrative report. Because I mean, that's essentially where that would be, or you could even extend that.
But wasn't that where the $300,000 or $400,000 iPad came in?
That was not in list of bills, that was a.
That was in section F.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those iPads were reflected in the 18-19 budget. Mr. Brown, Micah, was simply looking to purchase those items in advance in order to get the process started. So those iPads would be in the hands of children.
And I don't think Brian's saying he has a problem with that. It's just that it's coming up at such a time where he hasn't had a chance to really look at it. So therefore making a supermajority. And next month, so it gets held for a month. And next month, it gets passed by a simple majority. Just, I'm trying to advocate Brian's position because that's what he told me when we spoke. I think what we need to do, though, is to add your language about section F and find a way to say that with some language change to the resolution. But you would be able to vote on this at next week's meeting because it's been presented.
Right.
With your consent, with Brian's consent, I'm gonna tweak that to permit Paul to have his way with the section F. Okay?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that, yeah, we'll make those adjustments.
And I'd just like to add that what just happened now is a prime example of the purpose of this resolution, so that things can be presented as study session, and we can have this discussion in the public, open, and find little details that maybe we don't like, maybe we need to tweak this, can we look here, and then have that hammered out for when we go to vote, and everybody's informed, and we can make a better decision.
But in the meantime, if it is already hammered out and everybody's okay, a supermajority
Correct.
could pass it that.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, after we've had our last budget meeting, I think, we should be looking at everything with as much detail as possible before we start spending money. And I think this would be a good way to make sure we're spending money on the right things and we know what we're doing.
Brian, I'm still a little uncomfortable with it. And so if you could find a way to tweak the language to ameliorate my lack of comfort, and that is sometimes even a supermajority can be confused but embarrassed in voting what they think or what they feel should be done, but still not have all the facts. And so that extra window of opportunity where the research can be done in a dispassionate way offline and have other people weigh in on it, that provides that level of comfort. So even if it's a supermajority, we could still be caught off guard, and I don't want us to be caught off guard. I want us to do everything out in full view of the public and with all the information that we could possibly have.
I mean, I get that, but I think part of this is, if it's something that's really not necessary, say like right now.
Not an emergency.
Yeah, not an emergency.
That's the trick, right?
If the roof collapses between the study session and the budget,
That we need to vote
That's
on.
not
it.
an emotional reaction, that's a necessity, clearly.
Right. And I think to speak what you are worried about, if you're not comfortable voting one way or the other, you shouldn't be voting. You know what I mean? And I think that's what this is.
It's better
an
to
attempt
table it, or
alleviate.
if possible, wait. But sometimes we just do feel pressure to not wait or not even table because something really needs to get voted on that night, and I'm still not exactly sure
Right.
which way to vote. So
I
I
think
want
that's something we need to
that,
improve.
extra window of opportunity. So if you can.
You always have the right and privilege to table. I mean, you can always say, look, I'm not comfortable, I make a motion to table.
Thank you. Is that good, Rye?
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a very nice resolution.
Well, thank you.
Any other resolutions by board members this evening?
I don't know if it necessarily needs to be a resolution, but I was just wondering, and I apologize for bringing up your favorite subject. Being that the board has kind of decided that with the new scoreboard approved purchase that we were holding off on that until we have the sponsorship in line. I'm assuming at this point, end of June, even if we have the sponsors lined up today, that we would not be able to build this new scoreboard in time for the opening of the next school year. Am I correct in that?
We're at the drop table.
Right. So I think assuming that, we need to take some steps forward to ensure that the current scoreboard is fully functional and ready to roll for the beginning of the next year, because it's looking like we're going to have to depend on that for the foreseeable future until we get these sponsors on board. So I'm just looking for any kind of answer on any movement we've had in that regard. If we contacted the vendor about replacement parts and coming and doing an estimate, things like that.
Could you go to the microphone so the folks at home could hear, please?
That is what we've spoke about. I've talked to the vendors. There's a few of them, obviously, within that can handle that. We have plenty of time yet to do that. We have some efforts out there right now with sponsorships, but we are at the drop dead point as far as being able to be ready for opening day, even if we said today we move forward.
With the big scoreboard.
With a new one.
Not necessarily with fixing.
Not with repairs. Repairs, we still have plenty of time
Okay.
to get that done. We were just kind of waiting on the feedback of the sponsorship efforts. So it looks like that's the route we would be taking, is to repair until we get that. So, we're not without a scoreboard come opening day.
Right.
So that is definitely our plans to have up and running for that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Brown, now I'm curious about something. Will sponsors only participate if it's a $300,000 electronic scoreboard? Are they not interested if it's the scoreboard we have with perhaps, a banner atop or a banner on the sides?
With the current, climate out there with scoreboards, what we have, no, they're not interested. We don't have anything but a small banner. It's not really a comparable item to what you see out there, with the other districts and what they're paying for.
I looked at some of those other scoreboards, and although a lot of them had the main part of the scoreboard had a lot of electronic movement, they had what looked like fixed
ad
advertisements.
panels on the
Right,
sides.
on the sides. So
Where our scoreboard's located and the size of it, and that was something I believe was in the mix when that scoreboard was first put out there. It just didn't pan out, and the dollars are much different. For what we would be paying for the repairs of the existing scoreboard to get it up to working condition, it's still a scoreboard that technology is 15, 20 years old. It's not the video boards that are, out there today with the new technology. But we are still looking to secure the sponsorships prior to moving forward. And that's where the location has a lot to do with it, the
I understand.
visibility.
Right, I understand the location's
so-
critical, and just to save time, I certainly would never support this scoreboard without knowing who the entity is, what the arrangement is, when they plan on providing the funds. So if we're not anywhere near that point, then let's get this scoreboard fixed. Let's live with the shame of an old-fashioned scoreboard. I don't know how we'll all get by, but darn it, let's try. And if someone comes up with some money and tells us when, then let's talk about that. That's excellent.
Have we looked at alternative advertising? Like, I know it's been mentioned, like selling advertising space on the turf itself. Is that something we're presenting as well when we're looking at sponsorships for this scoreboard?
That's really not my end of it. Dr. Short could probably elaborate on that much better than I could.
To answer your question, yes. Previously, to add to Mr. Bova's question about sponsorship, we've had banners in the past on the fence across the stadium. Probably 4 or 5 that come to mind. I don't necessarily want to name the companies that have ranged from $300 to $500 per banner. I think that's been the cost. So that is still actively being pursued, as well as the field stencil, if you want to call it.
All right, now, Scotty, in order to repair this, is it true that we might need a board resolution right now to table the high-end scoreboard for one more season. Because if we don't repair it with a motion that's approved by the board, then the standing protocol exists, and Bob Brown would be forced to follow what we instructed him to do, which was purchase the new scoreboard very quickly.
I have a question here, too. Thank you, Mr. Ritter. A question for my solicitor or my president of the board. A few months ago, we voted on this 7-2. All of a sudden, about a week later, 2 weeks later, we have a table because we had trouble with the mowing stuff. But the thing is, what is a vote any good if we back down from the vote? What's a 7-2 vote? If that's the board's decision at the time, how can we back down from the vote right now?
If you're asking me, if you haven't spent the money and haven't engaged and entered into a contract, a written contract, you have a right to rescind that and not go any further.
But the rest of the board will have to vote on it again, wouldn't they?
When you made a motion, when the motion to table passed, it's presently on the table, and it's not on the agenda yet. You have to bring it back to, rather, it's not on the table. You have to bring it back onto the table to vote on it again, because it's been tabled. You don't.
We never formally tabled it.
We didn't formally table nothing.
Okay.
But my question is this,
Then
if
you're-
Mr. Schott would cut a check for this company,
Well, he'd be covered.
he'd be covered because we already voted for this.
So you better take some, then Mr. Ritter's comment is well taken. You should take some sort of action to preclude the administration from proceeding in accordance with your prior vote of 7-2 to buy it. Right now, no contract's been entered into. So you still have a window of opportunity to say, the administration, don't enter into that contract. And I would do that by a tabling motion to the scoreboard subject completely, and there's no purchase made at this point.
And just so the board's aware that we've had these discussions within the budget meetings, and we have agreed and we have submitted a number of pamphlets out there to area businesses and companies requesting sponsorship. So the information is out there in the public. We were simply waiting for, and it's only been truly a month, for sponsorships to come in, thus to show the board that it would be paid for. So we are in a position where we're not going to purchase until Mr. Bova, and said it very well, we would like to present to the board those companies, those entities who wish to become a sponsor, and then the board would have to approve that moving forward.
Okay, so you've heard from your superintendent, and I think that kind of brings finality to it. He has said that the administration is not going to purchase a scoreboard, notwithstanding your vote 7-2 to approve it, based upon the events that took place following the vote, and that is this further discussion about having sponsors versus us paying for it. So right now, the scoreboard matter, the super scoreboard is in limbo. And until such time as you get sponsors, I don't think anybody's going to be purchasing a scoreboard.
And if I
Well,
may,
for public perception, I think it would be good to make a formal presentation to the board president.
Guy, can you repeat that, Mary Beth?
we couldn't,
For public perception, I think it's proper to make a formal motion to formally table the scoreboard purchase.
Mary Beth, we can't hear you.
For public perspective, she said it'd be better for us to table it. Is that
And I don't
correct, Mary
disagree.
Beth?
Yes.
I was just going along with Dr. Short's comments. Look, the formal thing to do is to make a motion to table the scoreboard matter and purchase of the scoreboard at this time. So do I hear a motion?
So John's going to make the motion. My motion is that we table the proposed purchase of a new high school auditorium scoreboard, and that we proceed with the repair and maintenance of the existing scoreboard, and that we proceed with the acquisition of potential sponsors for the new scoreboard.
Did you say
I would second that if
auditorium?
we amend auditorium to football
What
field.
did I say? What did I say?
Yeah, not auditorium.
If they need a scoreboard, we have a whole
New
other
high
discussion.
school stadium scoreboard, that's, yes.
Okay, so we have a second.
I'll read it again.
Yeah,
You don't have to.
think you need to, we got it.
Got it,
I
okay.
think everybody understood.
Second.
We have a table and a second. There's no discussion.
No
right?
discussion.
Bonnie, can we have a roll call, please? Everybody knows this is to table the scoreboard. Not
Well,
do away with
it's
the
by
table.
part. One part is the tabling, and the other part is to proceed with two things. Acquisition of sponsors, so that's not tabled, and to proceed with the repair and maintenance of some existing piece of equipment.
Right.
So can I wrap all three of those into one motion?
You did it. You did it. So roll call, Bonnie.
There you go.
Dr. Kalkstein.
Aye.
Mr. Lapsevich.
No.
Mr. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Ritter.
Aye.
Mrs. Warning.
I have a question.
There's no
There's no
questions or
discussion on
comments
the table.
during table.
I understand that, Mary Beth, thank you. No.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Bova.
Aye.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
Aye.
Mr. Gottman.
Aye.
Motion
Motion
carries.
carries.
What was the count, please?
7-2.
No abstentions?
The scoreboard, you can see.
No abstentions.
Thank you.
Can you email that to me,
All
John?
right. No,
Can I
Okay,
have,
now we're,
am I allowed to ask
Who
a
was the
question?
seconded, please?
Yes.
Who seconded?
Rick McIntyre.
Okay, I know Dr. Short, myself, several others have been out there for sponsorship. And we're waiting for sponsorship because it just has been, packets have been put together. If the sponsorship comes through, what do we do in that situation?
just
Untable.
untable.
Motion to untable.
On table?
but again, I think as far as timing goes,
I'm saying
I
if,
think we're past that point for this coming season.
Well, here's the long and the short of it. If you get a sponsor next week, tomorrow, whenever, anybody on this board can make a motion on the table, get a second, and vote on it. Now, it might be too late and it might not be too late, but the fact remains is Valerie needs to know there's a lifeline there. If there is somebody that comes forward, and I agree, I mean, to get a sponsor to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2 months is asking a lot. And that doesn't mean you might not get a sponsor by the end of the summer. And who knows what miracles can be done. At the end of it's August, September, and somebody says, hey, I've got $300,000 or $400,000 to spend on a scoreboard. Maybe you start construction then, and maybe you don't get all of the football season with it, but you get the last game of the year. I don't know.
Somebody like Dyson Associates.
Yeah, somebody like the engineers, or, you know,
Yeah.
I would suggest to you that process is there, Valerie, and you can untable it if you can get the votes to untable it, it's untable.
Well, I agree with you, because even if it's October, you still can construct that
Right.
scoreboard.
Without affecting.
But it's there.
Existing.
And you'll have it for spring ball.
Soccer, you can have it for anything.
thank you.
Just to further beleaguer the scoreboard topic, Mr. Brown, if I could have you go back up to the podium, I apologize. I know how much you love being up there.
And you didn't say who you were.
I've been reviewing the meeting that occurred when we voted on this scoreboard. And there are a number of things that happened in that meeting that I just feel like I need some explanation, some closure on, so we can kind of move forward. Because the more I watch it, kind of the more upset I get. I asked at one point if this had gone through a formal bidding process, and I think Mr. Schott interjected and said this went through CoStarz. Right. So, but then I'm confused about how that procedure works now, because if we got the bid through CoStarz, why are we receiving a bid directly from OES and directly from, allegedly from Daktronics, even though they say they didn't? Like that to me got really murky about the bidding process.
Well, like I said, it wasn't a formal bid. Matter of fact, let me just find that.
Paul, aren't all of those bidders approved through CoStarz.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the OES one, though, it was through, I'm just trying to find a copy of the resolution. Here we go.
That's impressive if you actually have that on you.
I have it right here, yeah. Actually, this resolution, and as a matter of fact, I can read it if you'd like, just so we have this clarification in terms of what we're talking about. Approve the purchase of a new Gateway High School Stadium scoreboard as budgeted for in the Capital Reserve Fund budget, and a projected total amount of approximately $300,000 from OES Inc. through the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance, NCPA. So that was their purchasing cooperative that they were offering that through, that we were able to purchase it from. Dectronics was through CoStarz. So again, it's another purchasing cooperative. Two different
places that
cooperatives.
have already publicly bid this
Correct.
item.
Correct.
That's the idea of the CoStarz. There are a bunch of different places you can go to that have already publicly bid the merchandise or service or whatever it is you're seeking to purchase. And once that's been done, you are not required to go out and do a public bid of it.
Correct.
Again, you can take it through that entity that is already nationally affiliated to do that. And what I'm hearing Paul say is both entities had that kind of blessing. They had already been through the screening process of public bidding.
Correct.
Didn't we do the same thing with the turf?
Yes, yeah, we actually purchased the new turf that's currently at the stadium through, it's called E&I. It's another purchasing cooperative as well.
Rick, just to add to the murkiness here, for my own sake, and that is the flexibility that could be involved with the customization of a scoreboard. In other words, it does not seem possible for anyone to respond to a bid and put all possible variations or customizations for a potential school board, because they don't know what the shading's going to be, so they don't know what sort of light emitting diodes to use, where there's going to be in the direct sunlight.
Right, they don't know the specific needs of each.
Right, and so they don't know what to charge for those, they don't know how many pieces of panels we want attached, what the color scheme is, what the software is and all that. So they put out a general bid, we can come back and be dissatisfied with that and want either more or less, and so now they've got to go back and bid a different price for it, so.
I think, I just want you to all know that these discussions are really not in order because you've tabled the matter.
And-
They should be discussed when you bring it off the table again, but let's just keep going here for a second. I think when they go through those those criteria, many of those factors are factored in, and I think that and I appreciate that there's the subtleties of what changes could be made, but the advantage of doing that, and I know that school districts, I know that municipalities, I know that other people that get involved in the purchase of signs go through these public entities, use them regularly, and don't have any problem being able to defend the position if someone takes the position where you had to publicly bid it. I think when you get the blessing of one of those affiliates, you're okay. You're not going to have the wrath of some other bidder coming in and saying, wait a minute, you didn't give me a chance to publicly bid it. That's the whole idea of going through that process. I just know that that's what goes on.
Right, and that's why this is not so much about a particular item like a scoreboard. This is about the murkiness of some high-priced purchased object and how that occurs, so that the board can understand
Right,
what these
I'm not that
nuances are.
familiar with that
Exactly.
actual process. I guess I had a different
Expectation.
idea of how that went. And I think actually you bring up a good point. You're not going to go to the CoStarz and there's not a menu there where, okay, they have the exact scoreboard I need, it's this much, and like Amazon, and you buy it. And I get that. So that's sufficient explanation. So I'm a little bit clearer on that, and I appreciate that.
You get a gold.
No, I'm unclear on that. So
Okay.
let me stop one moment.
Yeah.
Even through CoStarz, typically the buying entity says, we need a scoreboard, and has at least some framework of the thing they want to buy. And, I mean, I've been involved with the purchase of dump trucks and police cars, and you don't tell them exactly what you want, but you say, we need a police car to serve this purpose, and bidders respond with their answers, with their solutions. And typically, there are at least a couple of bidders, and there's a process where you open the bids, public process, and see what there is, who's got what, what's there. I'm done. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Fair enough.
I think Mary Beth
That's
lost
Mary, but
signal.
just go ahead.
So this process, and I will apologize in advance, I came in right in the middle of this. It's my first meeting, and it was clear there was not that method that I'm familiar with. And given the size of this purchase, I'm still surprised that it works in this manner. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying
I
there's
agree.
anything remotely illegal.
I mean, we could be publicly bidding this very easily.
It's just, it surprised me. And again, Mr. McIntyre, I want to, since we're talking about this, we then heard that our scoreboard, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but basically couldn't be repaired, or it was very difficult to repair, which is why we had this time crunch.
I think the actual quote, and that was something I was going to ask Mr. Brown about, was that the parts necessary to repair the current scoreboard were becoming impossible to obtain. And I want some clarification on that. Like, do you have any records of you know, reaching out to Daktronics, requesting parts and being denied?
I had given every email and every conversation that I had to, there was a few board members that requested them along with Dr. Short. And that's where that information came from, was Daktronics. And all the conversations that we've had, you'll never see once that he offered that up. And all
What
the
I'm asking you,
I
is
never
it about the
asked
bidding?
that because our conversation went by the way of, you know, he never brought that to the table.
This conversation you speak of is in regards to a new scoreboard.
No, this
No?
is in regards to repairing our old one that he had been out here himself or his people at many different occasions along with ours. And rebuilding what was in there was never part of the equation. It was always,
So if it was never part of the-
difficult thing
Okay.
for him to do. That was why our conversations 3 years ago started at looking at a potential new board.
Okay, what I'm asking you is, have we attempted to get replacement parts for this scoreboard and failed?
I have to go through somebody like Daktronics to get that.
Right,
You know,
so
they're the
have,
type of people to do that. He has repaired it throughout the years, but not to the point, it breaks down. That's what we're concerned about. Even though he gets the parts and repairs it, something else goes.
okay,
You know,
what I'm trying to get to the root of here is your statement in that meeting was that the replacement parts are becoming impossible to get or getting
And-
harder to find. I'm trying to understand what the genesis of that information was.
That was from my conversations with Daktronics throughout the times that we had to fix it.
So we did request
I've talked
parts
to him,
and
sure.
we're unable to replace parts.
Yes, and 3 years ago, that's why we started the process, you know, with conversations on a new board with Daktronics.
Okay, because he stood here like the next board meeting and said every single part in that board is still being manufactured currently by that
That's one
company.
of the things that kind of made me step back from dealing with him and all this time. Now, all of a sudden, it's no big deal.
Okay.
Yeah, Rick, from a I have a master's in computer science, and I understand a little bit about hardware, computer hardware. There are certain things called capacitors that have acid in them, and they wear out from time to time, and that's what makes your computer sometimes go dark, because those little things need to be taken out and replaced. So it's called planned obsolescence, so that the buyer needs to refresh some purchase every 5 or 7 or 10 years, whatever it is. So to say, we have a piece of equipment that we've, you know, in supply that's 10 years old that we could just mail out to you, sometimes you don't want to get a 10-year-old piece of, you know,
Well,
perfectly unused equipment, because it's already obsolete.
They still currently manufacture.
That's what I don't
all of those
understand.
parts.
Right, I don't understand that.
So somewhere in there, again, we're into this murkiness. This is what I'm trying to establish. I just feel like between that and the timing of the revelation of the Monroeville Mall tax reassessment at that meeting, and I understand there were certain circumstances involved with, that was, again, Mr. Bova's first meeting, and we wanted to include him in executive, so we went to executive after that meeting, and that's when we learned that. And just everything about that meeting is just clawing at me right now. I think knowing that we were taking $1.5 million hit going into that meeting, and I forget the numbers, Mr. Shaw, maybe you might have it in front of you, but we voted on a tremendous amount of expenditures that night, including the $300,000 scoreboard. We were in the millions of dollars, I believe.
$1,812,000.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Without having the information that we were coming up $1.5 million short, you know, as a result of the mall reassessment. So that, and then you add to it the discrepancy of whether our scoreboard is repairable or not. You didn't give a number, but you agreed to a number that was around $100,000 to replace the current scoreboard with basically what we have. And then we find out that the actual price of that's around, what do you say, $15,000 to $18,000. So all this adds up to my mind to a concern that, you know, to move forward as a board, you know, I'm getting off track here, but it will come back. One of the trappings of being a board member is micromanagement and trying to do too much as a board member. You know what I mean? And trying to oversee every part of every process when it comes to the district and when it comes to the administration. And I don't feel like that's our job. I feel like that's why we hire y'all. And we need to have a pretty considerable amount of trust, you know, in this room and throughout the district between the board and the administrators and those of you that are coming to us looking for money to spend, that you are coming to us with the best possible information, and that everything that's coming to us is going to give us the best options and a way forward to make the best informed decision. Now, I feel like we were pretty harshly misled in that meeting about this scoreboard purchase, and I'm not accusing you of anything, you know, right now, but that's why I'm asking these questions, because I can't get past the fact that I feel like we were not necessarily lied to, but misled, you know, and pushed towards buying the scoreboard. And with the number of large projects looming in this board's future, that level of trust has to be there moving forward, or else, you know, this board's not going to be able to operate within the, you know, the best interests of the community and the taxpayer. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments on this, but.
No, I agree with you, but I also think that if I'm a vendor and I'm coming in here and I have an opportunity to sell the school a $300,000 scoreboard, I might lead the maintenance director and well, it's going to cost you a lot to fix that, because they want to bring in the $300,000 school board. And I also agree that micromanaging isn't a good thing to do, but I think that the makeup of this school board, which I like, catches those things. And, you know, this school board has been very fiscally responsible, as the school board before was. And because of the makeup, I think that you'll find that we catch those things and we take a step back and we look at it and say, you know what, now is not a good time to purchase a $300,000 scoreboard because we just got hit with this bill from the mall and placement, and we took a step back and we decided to be the best interest of the taxpayers and the school to get sponsorship for that. And in the meantime, that's when Dactrons came in here and said, well, you know what, the price of this board new would probably be 15 or 20. I have all the parts and all that. He changed his tune a little bit too, because he still wants.
That's why I was asking if we have any kind of documentation of where we attempted to find parts and replace them and failed.
I have been here.
Short of that, we're just in this
And the school,
He said, she said thing.
the scoreboard has failed a number of times.
I know
There's
the
no
board itself
question
has
about
failed.
that. And I know that they've tried to get it fixed, and they want to get it fixed because they don't want it to fail during a football game, et cetera. So I'm sure that on our end, that Mr. Bob has the best interest of the school in his mind. You know, and Mr. Short, Dr. Short, everybody here is on the same page, you know, and they're looking out for the best interest of the school. And the timing of the scoreboard and the mall all coincided at one point. But as a board, we were able to step back and we caught it.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay.
And Mr. Brown, please don't take any of this
Yeah,
personally.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, I would
that,
too.
It was pretty ironic that when that company was not the selection of, you know, the superintendent and the committee, all of a sudden, he was able to do something he wasn't able to do for the last 5 years. You know, it only came out when he was not going to be the recipient of us buying a new scoreboard. You know, I was taken back by that as well as you were, and I lost a lot of faith in that company at that point just for that. Not that they weren't a good company, because they are. They're one of the tops in the country, just like OES. As far as the cost, you know, of $100,000, that was, you know, Mr. Bova just had some numbers there, and I never had a cost for it. I was asked to look into a new scoreboard, not into the repair of it. So, you know, a replacement of the existing. We were looking to go to what's out there today. So that really was never a option that was on my table to look at.
And I understand it, and if you rewatch the meeting, Mr. Bova actually asked you, what would a new scoreboard as we have cost? And you wouldn't give a number because you didn't have a
Because
number.
I didn't have it.
Which I think if you'd have stuck with that, we'd have been better off.
Yeah.
Because whenever you did say the 100,000, you said that's actually probably more accurate. But if you're telling me now you didn't have those numbers, I would
And I
prefer,
said that then.
I prefer an I don't know
Well,
over
you know,
something like that.
Hey.
You know what I mean?
Can I speak?
Okay.
Okay. Scotty, can I speak?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I'm appalled by Rick McIntyre trying to tell me, I'm the chair of the Buildings and Grounds, Bob Brown's the boss, and Mr. Dr. Shorts. We went into looking for a new scoreboard. When we met Jerry the first time, he's with Deltronics. He never mentioned one time, he says that scoreboard was unrepairable and it would cost too much to repair. Okay, besides that, we wanted a new scoreboard. Not to try to slide anything under the table with none of your board members, because I'm here for the taxpayers of this community. I'm not here buying this new scoreboard and give me a feather in my cap. The thing is, but the worm came out of the can when you, Mr. McIntyre, on your own, invited Jerry from Deltronics to enter one of our board meetings, which we already discussed this matter with him, but instead of you coming to me as a chair, or Mr. Brown or Mr. Short, informing us that he was going to attend our meeting because he had a chip on his shoulder because we never gave him the opportunity for his bid, which was a lie. We could have said, no, we don't want, when he had his chance, we don't want him in front of the public, but we was good enough to bring him up on board for his discussion, but not one time did he say that scoreboard could be repaired, never gave us a price, because the only thing he had in his mind was the $390,000 bid that he told us at the beginning. Then he finds out by somebody's, I don't know who he found out by, that the other guy's bid was a lot lower than his bid, so all of a sudden he's gonna come up with a magic number after we went through this for 4 or 5 months with this guy. So I'm just telling the taxpayers of Monroeville and Pitcairn, I wasn't out there to spend your money. We had orders, and we were discussions with the head people with this board, and also with the maintenance supervisor, that we were gonna get a new scoreboard, and that's what we needed. And that's the reason the figures came out the way they did. and I'm still appalled that we overturned the 7-2 vote. Thank you.
George, to answer part of that, Rick asked me if the individual could come and speak that evening, and I said, yes, that's okay. And I didn't think it was going to turn into what it turned into. And I should have informed Dr. Short and the rest of the board that that individual was going to be there. So Rick did not himself invite him.
Okay, I didn't know that, but the thing is, you should at least inform the board that he was going to be here down there.
If I remember correctly, we had executive prior to that meeting, and we had about a 5 to 10 minute discussion on the matter. And we decided as a board at that point to allow the man to speak. Now, and I understand why you're upset, George, and I'm sure we're going to be fine after this meeting, as we always are. But this is why we have these discussions. So my question is, though, and this is for both of you gentlemen, if he stood there and said things that you knew to be patently false, why was there no question? Why was there no redirect? Why didn't anybody call him on it? If he stood in here and was lying to the board, and somebody here knows that it's a lie, I feel like it's our obligation to
questioned him
point it
on a
out.
few things that evening about his warranty, and also all of a sudden he could find sponsors for us, which was never brought up with our private meetings with this gentleman. And he was giving us a five-year warranty. All of a sudden he came up with a 10-year warranty because he found out that other company was coming up with a 10-year warranty. Yeah, I questioned him on that evening.
All right, but if all along he has told us that the repair costs of our current scoreboard were unsustainable and not worth it, and then he turned around in this meeting, because to me that's the turning point in where we went from fixing what we have to getting what did Bruce call it, the super scoreboard. If that was the turning point and he flipped his position on that at that meeting, I was not aware at that point that he had ever told anybody on his board or administration that the parts were not available or that we could not repair it. If he says that in the meeting, now all of a sudden we can fix everything for 15 cents.
And
I feel like somebody in this room that knows that was BS needs to step up and call it.
And another thing he didn't state, which when I met him afterwards too, at another date, it's not only the parts in that scoreboard, but the whole frame's rotting out on that. Okay, it's like putting an engine in a rotted car. How much life can you get out of it? If you you can keep on welding, but after a while you can't weld on rot. That's another thing that we have problems with that scoreboard.
Well, we're back at square one. So is this thing fixable or not? We had a guy stand here and insist.
Well, I think Mr. Ritter's resolution is to at least get somebody in here to look at it. No, I mean, wasn't that part of it, is to get the current scoreboard up to snuff?
Mr. Brown, is it?
You envelop that with the table.
Proceed with the repair/maintenance of the existing scoreboard.
Correct. So I think our next step forward is to have somebody come in. If we're not comfortable with Daktronics,
I actually
I
did
understand.
that. I did that after that meeting because of what was here. I didn't feel it was my place to argue with a guest of the board. He can say whatever he wants, whether or not you believe it or not. That's something you got to decide. It wasn't up to me to stand here and have an argument with him. But after that meeting, I reached out to our other competitor in there, and they said that they can get the parts to gut it and redo it. Daktronics obviously can too. We did meet with them after that just to show that you're going to get a fair shot at it. Myself, Mrs. Warning, Mr. Lapsevich, the other Mr. Brown, we all sat with him on, I believe it was 2 different occasions, to make sure everything between the companies was apples to apples as best that we could from 2 different manufacturers. And that's where we left it. At that point, we haven't gone any further with any changes based on the concerns of sponsorships. I proceeded with Dr. Short to try to put something together, but I knew that talking to the other company, that in some way I can have it gut it, take all the parts out and redo it at a reasonable price. And we were waiting to see what the effects of the sponsorships were, so we know we're at that drop dead point. So, that was what Dr. Short and I spoke about just the other day about, at that point, we'll move forward with repairing it and then still work on the sponsorships.
So I think just to wrap it up from my end anyway, I don't know if anybody else wants to really keep talking about this much longer.
Well, I think, just so you know, I think this is all out of order. I told you that before. I think you guys aren't going to have anything to talk about when it comes back on the floor, because we've already had the conversation.
Well, I mean,
I
at this point, I mean, it's all kind of enveloped with the current scoreboard. There's a resolution on the table. The new scoreboard's all, been tabled. You know what I mean? So some of this I think is open for discussion, but just to sum up, where I am anyway. I came in this meeting feeling like I was misled in some capacity about this freaking scoreboard issue.
I just loved it.
And, I'm walking away from it tonight feeling that, maybe it wasn't you that misled me, but that.
Non-intentionally.
Right, no. And again, I didn't come in here, Mr. Brown, to come in and attack you. I just needed answers. And I was not aware that, until tonight, that Daktronics had told us that board was irreparable. So that to me is a very big piece of information. One that probably would have been more helpful at the meeting whenever he spoke, but I understand your point that you don't want to get up and start an argument. That meeting ran pretty long as it was. So I think what we're saying at this point is that we feel that Mr. Zaleski is possibly the one that, intentionally or not, misled the board in dealing with this issue.
So in order to wrap this up, Scotty, I would like to say that's why I tried to be pretty clever in constructing this. That is, we have a motion to table, and we're not talking about the purchase of a new scoreboard, but the other part we are talking about, proceed with the repair and maintenance of the existing scoreboard. So if Mr. Brown, in his attempt to carry this portion out, proceeds to try to repair or maintain it, he's free to come back to the board and say, you know what, we opened it up, we looked further. It would be a waste of money to proceed with the repair and the maintenance. With that new information, then the board could be free to untable the purchase of the other piece of equipment and move forward. So I would be happy if you would come back in a month or 2 or 3 and say, you know what, it's not working out. That would be a great report, and that would be an action item for us. No, I'm just saying, that would be clarity. In other words, it would relieve the murkiness about which we're so frustrated right now. It's good to know something is either succeeds or fails. Yeah, go ahead, Mary Beth.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just think in light of the changes in our budget and the feedback that we received from the public on a scoreboard purchase, that it's our responsibility to acknowledge the changes and the public dissatisfaction with proceeding in light of making budget cuts, layoffs, and a potential tax increase that's probably going to pass. I would love to get a new scoreboard, but I think we need the sponsors to be secured before we spend the money. And tabling it just gives the public the assurance that we're doing that. Did you get that?
And we've agreed to that.
We've agreed to that.
Yeah.
She was gone for a while. I believe she dropped out back at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
All right, we're done. We beat this to death.
Just one last little thing. In the future, when we have a meeting where we're voting on close to $2 million worth of expenditures, and there's a piece of information where we're gonna take $1.5 million hit, find a way to let us know before the vote.
Brian, could you write a find a way resolution,
You know what I mean?
please?
Looking back at that, I think that we should have probably sworn Mr. Bova in and immediately gone to executive and had a discussion. You know what I mean? Or a simple note left in front of us on the blotter, something like that. We need to be as informed as possible to make the right decisions.
And I don't think that they intended for it to be like
No,
that.
no, and I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying when we make a mistake, we have to, and I think we can acknowledge that maybe that was a mistake. We need to, identify and figure out a way to not repeat that mistake in the future. So it's no hard feelings here. I don't think anybody's trying to, pull the wool over our eyes necessarily, but that could have changed the way some of the votes went, in my opinion. So, find a way.
Right.
That's all.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Bob, you can have a seat over here.
Bob, you're doing a nice job.
Comments from residents on non-agenda items. We have person, Alyssa Beck.
She's here, I don't think
She's not here. Is there anybody else that wishes to address this board on non-agenda items? Seeing none, moving to reports. We'll start with Dr. Chakey,
Nothing at this time.
Dr. Rossi,
Nothing further.
Mr. Short, or Schott,
Nothing further, thank you.
Ms. Crum,
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Dice, Dr. Short,
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Ritter.
I am attempting to find a bit more out about telemedicine and telehealth to extend the nursing services, not just for our school district, but for any school districts who need remote services or are in rural districts, because this is a pattern that I think should be established by the state legislature so that all students can have the services, the clinical services they need, however that might be. So I'm proceeding with that.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Boba.
Nothing further.
Val.
I just want to congratulate all our graduates this year. It was a fantastic graduation ceremony. Congratulations to our graduates and good luck in the future. That's it for this evening.
Mr. Lapsevich.
Nothing this evening.
Dr. Kelsta. Mr. Gottman.
I got nothing.
Mr. McIntyre.
Can we talk more about school board? No, I don't have anything other than to say thank you to Mr. Murphy for his time and the excellent work he put in with the district.
We're going to do that next week.
Well, I understand. Well, I'm preempting you. And thank you for your service and good luck with everything moving forward. That's it for me.
Mary Beth.
No, I got nothing.
I have one thing this evening. I would like to send my condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Bill Seeger. Mr. Seeger was a school board member here 28 years. Also with Monroeville Baseball for a number of years. If anything at this school district should be named after someone, it would be Mr. Seeger. So my thoughts and prayers with his family and friends. And with that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. We're adjourned.